The year is 2012. The air in the county auction hall is thick, stale coffee and sweat. The low hum of farmers talking prices, talking weather, talking about the end of an era. Up for sale is the Miller farm, 300 acres of the best black dirt in the state, a legacy parcel, land that hasn't changed hands in a century. The auctioneer, a man named Henderson, wipes his brow. He knows this is more than a sale. It is a eulogy. Old man Miller, Frank, sits in the back row. His hands are folded over a wooden cane. His eyes are fixed on the floor. He is selling his birthright. His children wanted the city. They wanted stock portfolios, not crop reports. So the land had to go. The bidding had been fierce. It started high and climbed higher, past what was reasonable, past what the land could earn back in a decade. It was about pride now. Two corporate farms were battling it out. Men in clean boots and branded jackets, talking on cell phones to invisible bosses. The price reached $1.7 million. A gasp went through the room. Then 1.8. Silence. Henderson scanned the crowd. "Going once?" he said. "Going twice?" He paused, letting the silence stretch. Then a woman's hand went up in the middle of the room. Just a slight motion, not a wave, a statement. Henderson squinted. He knew her. Everyone knew her. Sarah Jensen. She had been sitting there quietly, listening. Her son sat beside her, a young man now. His jaw was set. Henderson nodded. "I have $1.9 million, he announced. The men in the clean boots looked at each other. One shook his head. They were out. This was emotional money, not business money. Henderson looked back at Sarah. "The bid is with you, ma'am," he said. "Going once? Going twice?" "Sold for $1,900,000 to Jensen Farms." A smattering of applause broke the tension, neighbors congratulating a neighbor. But in the back row, Frank Miller didn't clap. He just stared at Sarah Jensen. He remembered a different day, a different conversation, a day almost 10 years ago in his own kitchen. He had looked this same woman in the eye and told her she couldn't do it, told her a single mother couldn't possibly handle this very farm. He had refused to renew her lease. He did it out of kindness, he told himself. He did it to protect her. Now she owned it all. And he felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger. It wasn't regret. It was the cold, hard weight of being wrong. Completely and fundamentally wrong. This is the kind of story we tell. The stories of people who were counted out. The ones who were told no. Not out of malice, but out of a quiet certainty that is far more dangerous. If these are the stories you need to hear, the stories that prove the doubters wrong, then subscribe to this channel, because we have so many more to tell, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Let's go back to 2002. The funeral was on a Tuesday. The casseroles filled the countertops. Neighbors spoke in hushed, practiced tones. He was a good man, a hard worker. Such a tragedy. Sarah Jensen stood by the window of the small farmhouse. She watched the cars pull away, one by one, leaving trails of dust on the long gravel drive. Her son, Mark, just 14, stood beside her, not speaking, just being there. David, her husband, was gone. A tractor rollover on the back 40. A freak accident. The kind of thing that happens in a split second and changes everything forever. For 20 years they had been a team. David was the hands, the muscle, the instinct for the soil. Sarah was the numbers, the planner, the one who made the books balance. They had built this life together on rented land. 300 acres from Frank Miller. They weren't rich, but they were building something for Mark. Now, half of that team was gone, and the grief was a physical presence in the house. It sat at the dinner table. It lay in the empty side of the bed. But beneath the grief, another feeling was growing, a cold, sharp anxiety. The lease was up for renewal in the spring, 5 months away. Everything depended on that lease, the house, the income, the only life her son had ever known. She knew what people were whispering, at the church, at the co-op. What will she do now? She can't possibly run it on her own. She'll have to sell the equipment, move into town. Their words were meant as sympathy, but they felt like a verdict, a judgment already passed. That winter was long and quiet. Sarah spent the evenings at the kitchen table. In front of her was David's ledger, a thick, leather-bound book. Inside, in his neat, blocky handwriting, were 10 years of notes. Crop rotations, soil test results, fertilizer inputs, yields per acre down to the decimal point. It was his Bible, the farm's DNA. She read it not for comfort, but for a plan. She wasn't just a farmer's wife who kept the books. She knew this land. She had walked every acre. She knew the low spot in the west field that held water. She knew the sandy ridge on the north end that needed more nitrogen. She knew the numbers. She knew what was possible. She formulated a plan, a detailed 3-year projection. She would switch to a no-till system to save on fuel and labor. She would invest in a used GPS unit for more precise planting. She would do it herself, with Mark helping after school and on weekends. It was ambitious. It was daunting. But the numbers worked. On paper, it worked. All she needed was the land. In early March of 2003, she called Frank Miller. She asked if she could come by to discuss the lease. His voice on the phone was warm. "Of course, Sarah. Come on over." Frank Miller was a pillar of the community, served on the church board, coached Little League for 30 years. His family had owned this land since the homesteading days. He was a decent man, an honorable man. Everyone said so. She walked up to his tidy brick house, the same house he was born in. He met her at the door with a sad, kind smile. He led her to the kitchen. His wife, Mary, poured her a cup of coffee. They asked about Mark. They spoke about David. They remembered his laugh, his strong back. The kindness in their words was genuine. It made what came next even harder. Finally, Sarah took a breath. She pulled her folder from her bag. "Frank, I've come to talk about the lease," she said. "I'm ready to sign for another term." Frank's smile faded. He looked at his wife, then back at Sarah. He sighed, a deep, paternal sigh. "Sarah," he began, his voice gentle, "we need to talk about that." He folded his hands on the table. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of praying about this, and I don't think renewing the lease is the right thing to do." The words hung in the air. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She had expected a negotiation, a discussion about a higher rent maybe, not a flat refusal. She pushed her folder across the table. "Frank, I have a plan. I've run the numbers. I can make this work." He didn't look at the folder. He just shook his head slowly. "It's not about the numbers, Sarah. It's a 300-acre operation. It takes 2 strong men to run it right. David was one of the best, but it was a struggle even for him some years. The hours, the physical labor, fixing machinery in the middle of the night, worrying about rain, about drought, about the markets. It's too much for one person, especially for—" He trailed off, but she heard the unspoken words, "especially for a woman." especially for a grieving widow. "I'm not helpless, Frank," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Mark is a strong boy. He can help." Frank reached across the table and patted her hand, a gesture meant to soothe. It felt like a dismissal. "Of course you're not helpless. You're one of the strongest women I know. That's why I'm doing this. I couldn't live with myself if I let you try this and you failed. If you lost David's equipment. If you got in over your head with debt at the co-op. I'm not going to be the man who lets that happen. I'm protecting you. I'm protecting David's memory." Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who genuinely believed they were saving you from yourself. That is the most dangerous kind of doubt. Because you cannot fight it with anger. You can't argue against kindness. It's a cage made of concern. If you've ever been in that cage, let me know in the comments. Because this is where Sarah's story really begins. She tried to argue. She explained her plan for no-till farming, for precision agriculture. She told him she wouldn't be farming like David did. She would be farming smarter, more efficiently. He listened patiently, the way a father listens to a child's fantasy. When she was done, he just shook his head again. "That's all newfangled stuff, Sarah. The way to make a crop is with hard work and a strong back. I've already spoken to the Johnsons from over the ridge. They're good farmers. They're willing to take on the lease. They'll do a good job with the place." He said it like it was a settled fact, a kindness he had done for her, taking the burden off her shoulders. She pulled her folder back. Her hands were trembling slightly. She stood up. "Thank you for the coffee, Mary," she said. She didn't look at Frank. She walked out of that kitchen, out of that house, and with every step, the shock turned into something else. A cold, hard resolve. It settled deep in her bones. He thought he was protecting her. She would prove him wrong. Not with words, with work. She drove home in silence. The world outside the truck window seemed distant, unreal. She pulled into her own yard, the yard she might have to leave. She walked into the house. Mark was at the table doing his homework. He looked up. He saw her face. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked. "Mr. Miller isn't renewing the lease." She said the words out loud for the first time. They tasted like ash. Mark's face hardened. He was 14, but in that moment, he looked older. "Because of you?" he asked. "Because Dad's gone?" Sarah nodded. "He thinks I can't handle it," she said. Mark stood up. He was almost as tall as she was. "He's wrong," he said. Just 2 words, a statement of absolute fact. Later that night, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. She opened David's ledger again. She turned the pages, her fingers tracing his handwriting. She was looking for an answer, for a sign. She found it on the inside back cover, a note he must have written years ago, after a particularly hard season. It wasn't a plan or a number, it was a sentence. "The dirt doesn't know who's working it. It only knows good work." She read it once, then again. The dirt doesn't know. It doesn't care if you're a man or a woman. It doesn't care if you're grieving. It doesn't care what Frank Miller thinks. It responds to one thing: good work. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. She would not move. She would not sell. She would find other land. She would show them all what good work looked like. The next morning, she called a different landowner, a man who owned a rough 80-acre parcel down the road, land nobody wanted. It was hilly and full of rocks. The rent was cheap. She took it. Then she went to see Gus. Gus was a mechanic, a legend in the county. He could fix anything with a motor. His workshop was a chaotic cathedral of grease and steel. He had been David's friend. She found him under a broken-down combine. She explained her situation. She didn't have the money for a bigger tractor. She didn't have the time to make multiple passes over the fields. She needed to be more efficient. She had an idea. She had spent the winter reading about a new technology called GPS. Farmers were starting to use it for guidance, to steer tractors in perfectly straight lines. The commercial systems cost a fortune, tens of thousands of dollars. She couldn't afford that. But she had read about hobbyists, people building their own systems with off-the-shelf components. She spread a diagram out on his workbench, a rough sketch, a GPS receiver, a laptop, a simple motor to turn the steering wheel. "Can we build this?" she asked. Gus wiped the grease from his hands. He looked at the drawing. He looked at her. He saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't desperation. It was determination. He grunted. "It's crazy," he said, "but I like crazy. Let's get to work." For the next 2 months, they worked. Evenings, weekends. Mark came after school to help. They mounted an old laptop in the cab of her John Deere 4440. They wired a small electric motor to the steering column. Gus fabricated a custom bracket to hold it. They spent hours writing simple code, calibrating the system. Driving back and forth in the yard, the neighbors watched. They saw the strange contraption on her tractor. They whispered, "Poor Sarah, she's lost her mind. The grief has gotten to her." Frank Miller heard the whispers. He felt a pang of something. Guilt? No, he told himself. Sadness. Sadness that he had been right. She couldn't handle it. She was cracking under the pressure. He had done the right thing. In April, it was time to plant. Sarah drove her modified tractor to her new 80-acre field, the one nobody wanted. She took a deep breath. She booted up the laptop. She engaged the system. The steering wheel turned on its own. The tractor moved forward, in a perfectly straight line. She planted that entire field in a single day. Her rows were straighter than anyone's. Her seed placement was perfect. Her fuel consumption was a fraction of what it should have been. She wasn't just farming. She was innovating. Born from exclusion. Born from being told no. The first harvest from that rocky 80 acres was a surprise. The yield wasn't great, but it was profitable. She had proved the concept. She took her profit and reinvested. Not in a new house, not in a vacation. She bought a used no-till planter. Cash. The next year, another landowner heard about her. He had 150 acres. He was impressed by her efficiency. He gave her the lease. Now she was farming 230 acres. She was still a small operator, but she was growing, and she was doing it her way. The community started to split. The doubters still talked at the diner. "It's a fluke. She got lucky with the weather. Wait till she has a bad year." But others were watching. They saw her fields, clean, well-managed. They saw her equipment, old but meticulously maintained. They saw her at the co-op, paying her bills on time, in full, every time. Frank Miller saw it too. He would drive past her fields on his way to town. He didn't mean to, but his truck always seemed to take that route. He saw the straight rows. He saw the healthy crops. He saw the new grain truck she bought in 2005, a used but bigger Tandem Axle International. She paid for it with money she earned, cash. He never said anything. He would just drive by, a quiet witness to the success he had predicted was impossible. Let me tell you about the next few years, because this is where the story becomes bigger than one woman and one farm. It becomes a lesson in the power of the long game. By 2006, Sarah was farming 400 acres. She was renting from 3 different landowners. Her reputation was growing. She was known as the one who could get the most out of an acre. Her precision techniques were no longer a curiosity, they were an advantage. Younger farmers started calling her, asking for advice. How did you build that guidance system? What are your thoughts on cover crops? She always took the time to talk to them, to share what she had learned. She remembered what it felt like to be on the outside. In 2008, the financial world collapsed. Commodity prices plunged. Fuel costs soared. It was a brutal year for farmers. Several of her neighbors went bankrupt. Good farmers, hard-working men. But they were leveraged. They had too much debt. Sarah survived. It was hard. But she had no debt. She owned all her equipment outright. Her efficiency saved her. While others were selling land to cover their loans, she was stable. The dirt doesn't know about Wall Street. It only knows good work. In 2010, an opportunity came up. A 40-acre parcel went up for sale. It wasn't the best land, but it was for sale. She went to the bank, not for a loan, but to withdraw her savings. She walked into the real estate office. She made an offer, the full asking price, no contingencies. She bought her first piece of land, cash. It was a small victory, but it was hers. No one could take it away from her. No one could refuse to renew her lease. She stood on her own land. She picked up a handful of soil. It was real. It was hers. She was no longer just a tenant. She was a landowner. All the while, Frank Miller watched. He saw her name in the paper, in the list of property transfers. Jensen, Sarah, 40 acres. He felt that same strange feeling again, a mix of admiration and something else, something that felt like shame. He was older now. His health was starting to fail. His children were established in their careers, in cities far away. They had no interest in the farm. The thought of selling it was a constant, low-grade ache. Selling the land his grandfather had broken with a team of mules, it felt like a betrayal. But what choice did he have? He couldn't farm it himself anymore. He had been leasing it to the Johnson brothers, the ones he had chosen over Sarah. They were good farmers, but they were conventional. Their yields were average, their costs were high. He knew, though he would never admit it, that Sarah was a better farmer. She got more from less. She understood the land in a way they didn't, in a way he didn't. By 2012, Sarah was farming over 700 acres. She had hired her first full-time employee. Her son, Mark, was in college, studying agricultural engineering. He came home every weekend to help. They were a team. Jensen Farms was a respected name in the region, a model of innovation and efficiency. And then the news came. Frank Miller was selling the whole 300 acres by public auction. When Sarah heard, she felt a tremor go through her. This was it, the circle closing. She spent a week going over her finances, talking to her banker. She had good credit now, a long track record of success. The bank was eager to lend her the money. She knew what the land was worth. She knew what it could produce, under her management. She also knew what it meant, to own the land she had been cast out of. The land where she and David had started their dream. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Which brings us back to the auction hall, the air thick with tension, the gavel falling. sold to Jensen Farms. After the auction, as the crowd thinned out, Frank Miller made his way through the chairs. He walked slowly, leaning on his cane. He stopped in front of Sarah. Her son, Mark, stood protectively beside her. Frank looked at her. His eyes were watery. The certainty was gone, replaced by a weary humility. "Congratulations, Sarah," he said. His voice was raspy. "Thank you, Frank," she said. Her voice was even, not triumphant, just factual. He shook his head. "I was wrong," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "All those years ago, I was so sure I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you." Sarah looked him in the eye, and she delivered the quiet devastation, the simple truth she had carried for a decade. "You weren't protecting me, Frank," she said. "You were protecting your own idea of what a woman is. I didn't need your protection. I just needed the lease." Frank had no answer. There was nothing to say. He just nodded, turned, and walked away. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. You don't get the satisfaction of defeating an enemy. You just get the quiet, bitter knowledge that you were right all along, and the years you lost proving it. But that's not the end of the story, because a legacy isn't about what you acquire. It's about what you create for others. Sarah didn't just farm that land. She transformed it. She implemented a comprehensive soil health program, cover crops, no-till, managed grazing on the marginal acres. Within 5 years, she had doubled the farm's organic matter. She didn't just double the yield, she healed the land. Her son Mark graduated with honors. He came home, not because he had to, because he wanted to. He brought with him new ideas about drone technology, about data analysis. Together, they built a new company, Jensen Precision Ag. They designed and sold affordable technology to help other small farmers compete. The same kind of technology she and Gus had patched together in a dusty workshop. In 2015, Sarah did something else. She established a scholarship, the Jensen Family Scholarship for Women in Agriculture. Every year, it gives a full ride to a young woman from her state who wants to study agriculture. She would meet with the recipients every year. She would tell them her story. She would tell them, don't ever let someone else's certainty define your capability. The first scholarship recipient was a girl from a small town a few counties over. Her high school guidance counselor told her she was too smart to be a farmer. She graduated at the top of her class. She's now a leading agronomist. The ripple effect. That is the truest measure of success. Not the acres you own, but the lives you change. Frank Miller lived to see it. He saw the articles in the farm journals about Jensen Farms. He saw the sign at the edge of the property, announcing them as the county's conservation farm of the year. One summer afternoon, he attended a field day they hosted. He stood at the back of the crowd, an old man in a worn-out cap. He watched Sarah, confident and clear, explaining a complex crop rotation to a crowd of younger farmers, men and women, all listening, all learning from her. He didn't stay long. He just listened for a while. And then he left. No one even noticed he was there. The quiet witness, watching the world he thought he knew be remade by the woman he had dismissed. Today, if you visit the farm, Mark is the one running the day-to-day operations. Sarah is semi-retired, though she still walks the fields every morning. In the main workshop, next to the state-of-the-art diagnostic computers, there is a section of wall that is special. Mounted there, like a piece of art, is a rusty metal bracket, and a small electric motor, and a thick, coiled cable. It's the steering mechanism from the original guidance system, the one she and Gus built, the physical artifact of her refusal to quit. Sometimes a young farmer, a visitor, will ask what it is, And Mark will stop what he's doing. He'll walk over to it. He'll touch the cold, worn metal, and he'll tell the story of his mother, the story of a ledger book, and a quiet decision made at a kitchen table. He tells them about Frank Miller, but he tells it without anger. He tells it as a cautionary tale, about the danger of well-intentioned limits, about the cages we build for others, thinking we are building a shelter. The story always ends the same way. He points to the fields outside the workshop door, fields that are now some of the most productive in the country, and he says a phrase his mother taught him. The dirt doesn't know who's working it. It only knows good work. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting in a kitchen, or an office, or a workshop, and they are being told no. They are being told they can't, that it's too risky, that they don't have what it takes. And the person telling them this isn't a villain. They are a friend, a mentor, a parent, a landlord, someone who believes they are being kind. That is the hardest wall to climb, the one built of love and concern. Sarah's story is a blueprint for how to climb it, not with anger, not with arguments, but with decades of quiet, relentless, excellent work. You don't tear the wall down. You simply build something so magnificent on the other side that the wall becomes irrelevant, a monument to your own capability. If this story means something to you, if you've ever had to prove someone wrong, tell us about it in the comments. Sharing these stories is how we remind each other what's possible. Subscribe for more stories of those who were told no and did it anyway. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is standing in front of a wall right now and needs to be reminded that the dirt doesn't know. It only knows good work.